There is almost no one in your life you cannot bring yourself to forgive, except the one whose reflection you see in the glass. Carl Jung named the most devastating psychological trap a deeply feeling person can fall into. It operates through a mechanism no one ever taught you to recognize. When someone you love stumbles, you offer mercy almost instinctively, without deliberation. When you stumble, a courtroom materializes behind your eyes. The very sensitivity that rescues others is the same one that quietly pulls you under. Before we reach the end of this, you will understand the exact machinery holding you captive. You will see why the relentless inner voice has always resembled a conscience, and what it truly is beneath that disguise. You will learn the difference between guilt and shame, and why the person who feels everything drowns in one while convinced they are drowning in the other. You will come face to face with the mask you constructed out of goodness itself, and the prison you erected around your own imperfections. And you will discover the single act Carl Jung called the most difficult thing a feeling person will ever be asked to do. Because somewhere deep inside you, a self you sealed behind walls to remain safe is still alive, still breathing behind the stone. The exit was never to feel less. It was to redirect the instrument. Let me take you into the room where the trial convenes. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. The house holds the kind of silence only the small hours can produce, a silence with actual mass to it. You are not in distress. Nothing has occurred. And then, without any warning, your mind reaches back across a decade and retrieves a single moment. Something you said to someone who mattered. A relationship you remained in long after it had begun to decay. An instance where you fell visibly short in front of someone whose regard meant everything. You do not simply recall it. Your body recoils. A wave of heat moves across your chest and rises into your throat. Your stomach drops the way it would if you had just been found out. You are lying motionless in a darkened room, and you are experiencing a complete physical response to something that concluded 10 years ago. You are retrying a case that was already closed, at full emotional intensity. And this is the piece almost no one ever says aloud. You do not merely recall the failure, you resentence yourself with it. You retrieve the memory and enter it once more as evidence, not evidence of a difficult chapter or a younger version of yourself or a human being doing what they could with what they possessed. Evidence of what you fundamentally and permanently are. That is not memory. That is a verdict read aloud again to an audience of one every single night. This is what we are going to examine together. First, 2 inner states that are indistinguishable from the inside but are not the same thing, and why you keep confusing the one that could free you with the one that is gradually burying you. Second, where that nightly voice actually originates and why it has worn the costume of a conscience so persuasively that you never once considered putting it on trial. And third, what Carl Jung places on the other side of the single door you have spent your entire life refusing to walk through. Stay with me. By the time this is finished, the voice that rules you at 3 o'clock in the morning is going to sound entirely different. Let us begin with what lives in your body, because shame is not a thought. This is the first error everyone makes, and it is precisely why nothing they have attempted has changed anything. You cannot defeat shame through argument because shame does not enter as an argument. It enters as a weather system. It is the sudden heaviness in the chest. The recoil before a memory has even fully surfaced. The burning in your throat in the middle of the night. It moves through the nervous system faster than words can follow. This is why the rational approach keeps failing you. You have seated yourself, laid out the evidence, demonstrated point by point that the event was not entirely your doing, and walked away from that inner courtroom having won every argument, and felt absolutely nothing change. because you were arguing with a climate. You were presenting a legal document to a thunderstorm. So let us name the two states precisely, because the distinction is everything. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am the mistake. Guilt concerns behavior. It points toward a specific action, and it can be addressed. You can repair it, offer an apology, set things right, and put it down. Guilt has a way out. Guilt is, in its own painful fashion, useful. It is the psyche maintaining alignment with your own values. Shame has no exit, because shame is not about what you did. It is about what you are. And you cannot apologize your way out of existence. You cannot make amends for simply being. So the person trapped inside shame does the only thing the architecture of shame permits. They serve a life sentence with no possibility of release for the offense of being themselves. And the person who feels deeply is almost surgically designed to drown in it. Here is the reason. You have spent your entire life reading the emotional weather of the people around you. It is your oldest and most instinctive skill. Before you had language for it, you could feel the temperature shift the moment a parent entered a room. The nearly invisible expressions, the tension gathering around the eyes, the specific weight of a particular silence. You learned to track the internal state of everyone near you because, for a long time, your safety depended on it. But that same antenna absorbs something it was never meant to internalize. It receives you are not enough. From an overwhelmed parent, from a world that rewarded performance and punished need. And because your instrument is so finely calibrated, you did not process that as one person's opinion or log it as a single data point. You received it as an undeniable truth. You absorbed the unspoken mood of the people around you and transmuted it into a law of your own nature. This is what it means to have outsourced the verdict. Most people carry their judge inside themselves, a steady internal sense of worth that holds its shape regardless of the room they enter. But you, because you feel everyone so completely, relocated that judge's seat to somewhere outside your own body. You surrendered it to other people. And so every opinion of you lands not as information, but as a ruling. A stranger's coolness becomes a sentence. A friend's distracted response becomes evidence. You find yourself straining to earn the approval of people you do not even respect, because your inner baseline is permanently set to guilty, and you are desperately searching for anyone who will overturn it. And here Jung hands us the structure beneath all of it, the persona. In Jung's own words, the persona is the mask we wear to meet the world, the face we present outward, the role we occupy. Through the persona, he said, a man endeavors to appear as this or that. It is ordinary. Everyone wears one. It is how we navigate daily life. But Jung also identified the exact danger it carries. The risk, he said, is in becoming indistinguishable from the persona. The mask fuses to the skin until the person no longer knows where the performance ends and the self begins. For most people, the persona is simply a social instrument. For the person who feels everything, it became something far more perilous. It became goodness itself. You did not merely construct a mask. You built an entire identity around being the helper, the dependable one, the one who causes no harm, who absorbs others' discomfort so they do not have to, who would sooner carry a burden alone than ever become one. You made goodness your strategy for survival, and here is the trap coiled within the trap. When goodness is the face you wear to remain safe, then any ordinary, inevitable human flaw does not feel like a flaw. It feels like exposure. Like the truly defective thing behind the mask is about to slip through and be seen. And shame is the alarm system, the full-body siren that triggers the instant your actual, imperfect self threatens to show through the goodness. The heat is the alarm. The flinch is the alarm. The 3 a.m. replay is the alarm sounding again over a flaw you revealed 10 years ago as though the mask is still slipping right now in the dark. You have been calling that alarm your conscience. It is not your conscience. But to understand what it truly is, we have to look at the part of you it was constructed to conceal. The reason you cannot simply set this heavy thing down, the reason every gentle encouragement to just forgive yourself slides right past you, is that you have fundamentally misidentified what you are holding. You believe the shame is structural. It is load-bearing. Sit with the actual fear for a moment because you have likely never spoken it aloud. If I forgive myself, I will become careless. If I loosen my grip even slightly, I will become the selfish, negligent, harmful person I have devoted my entire life to refusing to be. My shame is the only mechanism keeping me decent. The self-punishment is not the sickness. It is the remedy. It is the one discipline I cannot afford to release. This is the most critical misunderstanding in the entire trap. Your self-condemnation is not what makes you a good person. It never was. Consider the opposite for a moment. The person who genuinely has no conscience. The one who causes harm without residue. Who feels no heat rising in the throat. No midnight tribunal. Nothing at all. That person is not liberated. That person has a dial that simply does not function. The needle fixed at zero, unmoved by any amount of damage done. Now, look at yourself. Your dial is not broken in the opposite direction. Your dial works. It works so exquisitely that you have pressed it past the red line and held it there with both hands. Let the engine smoke and scream, and then looked at the smoke and named it virtue. You looked at a system in violent overload and called it being good. That is not conscience. A functioning conscience informs you and then releases you. It says, that was beneath you. Now do better. What you possess is a conscience that has broken down into permanent self-prosecution and then disguised that malfunction as moral rigor, so you would never think to question it. And now Jung gives us the precise name for what is actually operating, and it will feel uncomfortable because it is the exact inverse of how you have always understood yourself. Inflation. Jung used the word inflation to describe an expansion of the personality beyond its natural boundaries, a condition in which the ego extends beyond its proper human scale. We typically picture inflation as brightness. The person who believes themselves chosen, exceptional, destined, elevated above others. But Jung understood that inflation has a twin born in shadow. There is a grandiosity of darkness as well. And it looks precisely like humility, to believe that you are uniquely responsible, uniquely culpable, uniquely beyond the reach of the forgiveness you extend so freely to everyone else. That is not humility. That is negative inflation. The ego refusing its ordinary human dimensions and electing instead to be the singular, central figure in a private cosmos of fault. Consider what you are genuinely claiming when you withhold forgiveness from yourself. You are claiming to be the single exception. Billions of human beings have made mistakes and are still permitted to be human, but not you. You have placed yourself outside the entire human category. You have decided that the laws of grace, the very laws you apply to everyone around you, do not govern your case because your case is different. Your error is larger. That is not smallness. It is a strange, inverted enormity. You have made yourself the central character in a private cosmic trial, the most guilty, the least forgivable, the one whose ordinary human failures are somehow structural to the moral order of the world. Your relentless self-judgment is not humility. It is a secret, inverted grandiosity. You have made yourself the axis of a private universe of fault. And it began long ago as the only resolution to an impossible childhood equation. If I am the problem, then perhaps I also hold the power to fix it. The inflation was a form of protection. If everything was your fault, then nothing was random and nothing was beyond your control. But the child's solution has grown into the adult's cage, and the wall you built to contain it all is about to become the most important thing in this entire story. Before we continue, one question. Answer it in the comments, not only in your mind, where the tribunal still controls the transcript. What is the verdict about yourself that you have never once permitted yourself to overturn? Not the whole story. The single sentence you have been rereading at 3 o'clock in the morning. Leave it below. You will see very quickly that you were never the only one carrying it. So you build a wall. If shame is the alarm and the alarm fires every time the real self surfaces from behind the mask of goodness, then the obvious strategy, the one you have, been running your entire adult life without ever consciously choosing it, is straightforward. Keep the real self contained. Wall it inside. Organize your entire existence around never becoming the person your shame insists you secretly are. Let me introduce you to someone. Call him the man who holds everything together. He is 47. By every outward measure, he is the most grounded presence in any room. He is who people reach for when things collapse. He steadies his family. He steadies his work. He is capable in a way that appears almost effortless. He has never, not once, allowed the things that matter to fall apart, and privately, his entire existence is a performance built on a foundation of dread, because he keeps a ledger, a running account, updated nightly, of every person he has ever disappointed, every version of himself he failed to grow into, every moment he fell short, cataloged, filed, ready for review at 3 o'clock in the morning. To everyone around him, he is the steadfast one. Inside, he feels like a fraud, one mistake away from final exposure. And so he never stops moving, never stops repairing, never stops demonstrating, because the moment he does, the ledger takes the floor. The wall he constructed to keep the shame contained is functioning. And it is that exact same wall that has kept his entire life the dimensions of a cell. This is where self-help language can never reach, because it reads as strength. From the outside, he appears to have everything in order. But the capability is not freedom. It is the form the cage has taken. Every brick laid to keep the flawed, unacceptable self locked away is a brick that also sealed out spontaneity, sealed out rest, sealed out the possibility of being loved for who he genuinely is, rather than for what he reliably produces. He erected a fortress to imprison the thing he feared, and discovered too late that he was locked inside it, in a space no larger than his own body. Jung had a word for this interior territory, the shadow. The shadow is the self you abandoned in order to become tolerable. Everything that was punished out of you early, that retreated underground, the rage you were never permitted to feel, the need you were trained to find shameful, the appetite, the envy, the ordinary hungers of a living person, all of it cleared from the stage and sealed in a back room because it contradicted the role being performed. As Jung defined it plainly, the inferior part of the personality, the sum of all those things, including the deliberate suppression of painful thoughts and feelings we could not bear to hold in the light. And here is the law: the man who holds everything together was never told. You cannot integrate what you condemn. The fragments of yourself you have judged and exiled do not cease to exist when you banish them. This is the great illusion. You believe shame is keeping the darker self gone. It is not. It cannot. Nothing in the psyche is ever truly discarded. What you exile through shame descends underground and operates you from beneath. The precise flaws you refuse to witness are the ones steering you unseen from the basement. By condemning your shadow, you did not eliminate it. You handed it the controls. The alchemists had a name for this passage, the nigredo, a darkening in which the material dissolves and decays into something that resembles pure ruin before it can become anything new. They understood that nothing could be transformed until it had first passed through that blackness. And Jung recognized the nigredo for what it is psychologically, the confrontation with the shadow, the descent into the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime refusing to face. The difficulty is that you have mistaken the Negredo for your permanent residence. You believe the darkening is you. You believe the descent is a life sentence rather than a passage. And this is what gives the 3 a.m. memory its terrible charge. You have wondered why it returns, why that particular failure resurfaces year after year, when you would surrender almost anything to be free of it. You assume it comes back to punish you. It does not. Shame is the battery, what charges the memory with electricity. But the reason it keeps surfacing is something else entirely. The psyche is trying to return it to you. The memory replays because the part of yourself you exiled in that moment is knocking, asking to be admitted. The repetition is not punishment. It is the unconscious, with infinite patience, presenting the same exiled fragment again and again, waiting for the night you finally stop prosecuting it and begin to integrate it. The loop does not end when you win the trial at last. The loop ends when you step away from the trial completely, which brings us to the precise mechanism that breaks it. Here is the revelation, the thing the entire structure was constructed to conceal from you. The self-judgment was never your conscience. It was shame defending the persona, the alarm system guarding the mask of goodness, the gatekeeper at the entrance to the shadow, ensuring the exiled parts of you could never find their way home. And the entire apparatus, the tribunal, the ledger, the midnight retrial, was doing precisely one thing all along, with perfect efficiency, keeping you out of your own life. Every unit of energy spent prosecuting yourself was energy withheld from the act of living as yourself. The wall did not protect you from the monster. There was no monster. The wall protected the shame, and it cost you the only thing you ever truly possessed. The unrepeatable experience of being the person you actually are, imperfections and all, while you are still here to inhabit it. And now Jung asks something of you that will sound, at first, almost offensively simple, and then, when you feel its full weight, nearly impossible. In his essay, The Psychotherapist or the Clergy, Jung wrote one of the most quietly devastating passages in all of his work. As Jung reflected, the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ. All these are undoubtedly great virtues. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all the beggars, the most impudent of all the offenders, the very enemy himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness? Read that again slowly, and notice where it settles in your body, because you already know how to do the hard part. You feed the beggar. You forgive the insult. You extend grace so naturally, you do not even register it as effort. You are, by any honest measure, extraordinary at the very thing Jung calls the height of moral virtue. You have simply decided there is one beggar you will let starve, one enemy you will never pardon, one person, the one whose face looks back at you in the mirror, who stands permanently outside the kindness you give away to everyone else every single day. This is why Jung called self-acceptance the essence of the moral problem, not a footnote, not a pleasant afterthought once the real work is complete, the essence. Because anyone can be generous with a stranger. The terrifying part, the part that reveals whether your grace is genuine or merely another performance of goodness, is the moment you discover that the most impudent offender is you. And you must decide whether your mercy was ever truly mercy or only a means of being accepted. Near the end of his life, Jung said that the most terrifying thing a person can do is to accept themselves completely. Not the most pleasant, not the most peaceful, the most terrifying. He understood precisely what he was asking. He knew that for the person who constructed their entire identity around the prosecution, releasing the case feels less like relief and more like erasure. Because who are you if you are not the one holding yourself to account? So let me show you who you are on the other side of it, the contrast drawn precisely so you can feel the difference between the two lives. The person still inside the trap apologizes for having any needs at all. They replay a decade-old failure, as though the verdict has not yet been delivered, as though the jury might this time return a different result. They dismiss every compliment the moment it arrives because affirmation is inadmissible in a court that has already decided. They feel everything and enter every feeling as evidence against themselves. The person who has withdrawn from shame is not a different person. This is the part that matters most. They did not become numb. They did not stop feeling. They still remember everything. The same sentence, the same relationship, the same moment they fell short. They experience it all with the same depth they always have. The sensitivity did not diminish. The instrument is just as fine. They have simply stopped entering each feeling as evidence against themselves. They have ceased to be the defendant. That is the whole of the transformation, not less feeling. The same feeling, no longer weaponized. The same memory, no longer submitted into the record of a trial that never should have been convened. And self-acceptance, in Jung's understanding, was never indulgence. It was never releasing yourself from accountability to go cause harm. It is precisely the opposite. It is the absolute prerequisite for individuation, for becoming a single, continuous person, rather than the warden and the prisoner you have fractured yourself into, one performing goodness in the daylight, while the other waits in the cell below. You cannot become whole while half of you remains on trial. You must become the benefactor of your own internal beggar. You must extend the gift of your own kindness to the one person your entire identity was constructed to prosecute. Not because the failures did not happen, but because you too belong within the category of those who deserve grace. And you have been quietly and ruinously treating yourself as the sole exception. And when you do this, when the shame is finally withdrawn, the 3 a.m. memory does not disappear. I want to be honest with you because false reassurance is its own form of cruelty. The memory remains, you will still remember, but it loses its teeth. Its edges soften, your body no longer flinches. The heat no longer rises in your throat. It becomes what it always should have been, something that occurred in a life that is still being lived by a person who is permitted to have a past. You remember more, and it stops wounding you. So return to the very beginning, to that friend, the one who came to you shattered, the one you would forgive without a second thought, the one you would never allow to be defined by their worst moment. You are that friend. You always were. The entire time you were searching for someone gracious enough to forgive the unforgivable thing, you were standing before a mirror, withholding from yourself the one gift you have never once withheld from anyone else. The person who feels too deeply was never undone by their sensitivity. Hear that clearly, because you have been told the opposite your whole life. Your depth of feeling is not the wound. The sensitivity is not the flaw. You were broken by what you did with it, when you turned it inward and named the cruelty conscience. And the way out is not to feel less. It was never to feel less. The way out is to perform the single act you have spent a lifetime treating as forbidden, to take the vast, unreasonable grace you pour into the world, and finally, just once, turn the instrument around. So forgive yourself, almost aggressively, not quietly, not someday, not once you have suffered sufficiently to earn it, because you will never conclude you have suffered enough. The court does not operate that way. Forgive yourself almost aggressively, not because your past failures did not occur, but because they do not hold permanent ownership of your future. The trial is finished. It was always finished. You were simply the only one who never received the ruling. You are free to go.